At approximately 3:52 p.m. local time, a United States warship was conducting routine operations in international waters. The vessel was maintaining a steady course and speed consistent with standard transit procedures. Environmental conditions were stable. Visibility was clear. Sea state remained within normal operating limits. At that time, surface contacts were observed operating in the same maritime area. The contacts approached gradually rather than abruptly. Speed changes were moderate. Course adjustments were minimal but deliberate. No radio communication preceded the movement. No navigational warnings were issued. The approach did not resemble coincidental transit. Distance between the vessels began to reduce. The closing range occurred over several minutes. Separation decreased to a level consistent with sustained shadowing rather than brief crossing. Relative bearing stabilized as alignment developed. The interaction shifted from parallel movement to monitored proximity. The contacts were assessed as Venezuelan naval vessels based on hull profile, superstructure configuration, and movement characteristics. Identification was made through sensor data rather than communication. The number of vessels was confirmed through continuous tracking. The approach remained controlled. No sudden maneuvers were executed. No erratic movement was observed. Speed remained within predictable limits. The Venezuelan vessels adjusted course incrementally to maintain relative position rather than intercept directly. The lack of communication was noted. Standard maritime channels remained open. No bridge-to-bridge calls were initiated. No signals were exchanged. Silence persisted throughout the approach phase. The absence of dialogue became a defining feature of the interaction. As proximity was established, shadowing behavior became evident. Distance was held within a narrow range. Minor corrections were made to preserve alignment. Speed adjustments followed changes in relative position rather than initiating them. The movement pattern suggested intent to maintain presence rather than to maneuver freely. The U.S. warship maintained its course. No deviation was made in response to proximity alone. Speed remained constant. Navigation followed established parameters. The vessel did not acknowledge the approach through movement or communication. Internal monitoring continued. Sensor systems tracked speed, heading, and spacing continuously. Data remained stable. No loss of situational awareness occurred. The encounter was logged as an evolving interaction rather than an immediate concern. The operational environment remained unchanged. No additional surface contacts entered the area. Airspace monitoring indicated no concurrent aerial activity. Civilian traffic remained minimal. External factors did not influence movement. The shadowing persisted. Time elapsed without escalation. The interaction extended beyond a brief encounter, indicating sustained intent. Proximity was maintained through continuous adjustment rather than static positioning. The moment marked the beginning of the encounter. From this point forward, the interaction was no longer routine. The presence of Venezuelan naval vessels within close operating distance established conditions under which subsequent movement would be evaluated. No action was required at this stage. The situation continued under observation. Movement remained controlled. Silence remained unbroken. The encounter proceeded without incident. Prior to close proximity, surface contacts were already under continuous tracking by the warship's onboard sensor systems. Initial detections occurred at extended range and were maintained without interruption. Radar returns remained stable, providing consistent data on bearing, range, and relative movement. Tracking quality remained high. Radar signatures indicated surface vessels operating at steady speeds. No abrupt changes in velocity or heading were observed during initial detection. Movement patterns appeared deliberate rather than random. The contacts maintained coherent trajectories within the operating area. Electro-optical systems provided confirmation. As distance gradually decreased, visual sensors supported radar tracking. Hull outlines and superstructure features became distinguishable. Identification relied on physical profile and motion behavior rather than transmitted signals. Sensor fusion ensured continuity across multiple observation methods. The contacts were identified as Venezuelan naval vessels. Identification was based on known platform characteristics, including silhouette, displacement indicators, and maneuvering behavior. Classification was completed through observation rather than communication. No challenge or response procedures were initiated. The number of vessels involved was confirmed early. Each contact was tracked individually and collectively. Track numbers were assigned and maintained. Relative spacing between vessels was monitored continuously. No ambiguity existed regarding how many ships were operating in proximity. Situational awareness was complete before distance became a factor. The developing picture was assessed in real time. Sensor data updated continuously. No gaps in tracking occurred. Awareness did not depend on proximity or visual confirmation alone. The encounter remained within detection range at all times. No electronic interference was observed. Communications and sensor channels remained clear. No jamming or signal degradation was detected. Environmental conditions supported consistent detection accuracy. Sea state and visibility remained favorable. The movement pattern was assessed as coordinated. Relative position suggested deliberate alignment. Speed adjustments occurred within narrow margins. Course changes were gradual and synchronized across multiple vessels. The behavior indicated intentional positioning rather than coincidental transit. No communications were received. Standard maritime frequencies remained open. No identification calls were made. No navigational warnings were transmitted. The absence of communication was consistent across all detected vessels. Silence was treated as a data point. The lack of radio traffic contributed to assessment rather than uncertainty. Behavior was evaluated through movement alone. The interaction was defined by positioning, not exchange. The warship did not alter posture during tracking. Course and speed remained unchanged. Detection did not prompt maneuvering. Observation remained the priority. The situation was managed through awareness rather than response. The operating environment remained stable. No additional contacts appeared during this phase. Airspace monitoring showed no associated aerial activity. Civilian traffic did not affect tracking or assessment. As time progressed, clarity increased. Distance reduction improved sensor resolution. Identification confidence strengthened. Relative motion became easier to predict. The picture evolved gradually rather than suddenly. The encounter did not introduce surprise. All movement occurred within established detection parameters. No vessel entered proximity without prior tracking. No behavior emerged outside observation range. By the time proximity became externally noticeable, internal awareness was already established. The interaction proceeded under full visibility. All movements were recorded. All changes were monitored. The situation remained defined by detection rather than reaction. Tracking continued uninterrupted. The encounter advanced under complete situational awareness, with all surface contact accounted for and continuously observed. As shadowing continued, distance between the vessels was maintained within a narrow and consistent range. Separation neither closed rapidly nor widened unexpectedly. Relative spacing remained controlled through continuous adjustment rather than fixed formation. Course and speed corrections occurred incrementally. Small changes in heading were applied to preserve alignment. Speed variations were minor and measured. No abrupt maneuvers were recorded. Each adjustment appeared calculated to maintain relative position rather than to initiate engagement. The interaction extended over time. The proximity was not the result of a single maneuver or brief encounter. Instead, it developed into a sustained condition. The vessels remained within observation range for an extended period, indicating continued intent to maintain presence rather than to cross paths and separate. Maintaining proximity required constant correction. Environmental factors, including sea movement and minor drift, necessitated ongoing adjustments. Relative motion was managed through frequent but subtle changes. Alignment was preserved through reaction rather than anticipation. The movement pattern remained stable. Relative bearings fluctuated within narrow margins. Distance remained predictable. Speed differences were corrected before they accumulated. The vessels remained oriented in a manner consistent with shadowing rather than independent navigation. No formation was formally established. Spacing was preserved without fixed geometry. The vessels did not adopt rigid alignment or standardized stationing.
Proximity was achieved through responsive movement rather than predetermined positioning. The U.S. warship maintained steady navigation. Course and speed remained consistent with routine operations. No maneuvering was initiated to disrupt proximity. The vessel continued forward movement without acknowledgement of alignment. Shadowing imposed constraints. Maintaining relative position required continuous attention. Each change in heading by the warship necessitated a corresponding response. The burden of correction rested on the shadowing vessels rather than the transiting ship. Predictability increased over time. As alignment persisted, movement patterns became easier to anticipate. Speed and heading adjustments followed established trends. Variability decreased as options narrowed through sustained proximity. No escalation occurred during this phase. Distance remained within controlled limits. No attempt was made to reduce separation beyond established proximity. No signaling or communication accompanied movement. The interaction remained defined solely by geometry and motion. Situational awareness remained unchanged. Tracking systems continued to monitor relative position without interruption. Sensor data remained stable. No loss of clarity occurred as time progressed. The operating area remained calm. No additional vessels entered proximity. Airspace monitoring showed no concurrent activity. External conditions did not alter the interaction. Time emphasized intent. Sustained proximity required continued effort. The duration of alignment distinguished the interaction from incidental transit. The encounter evolved into a prolonged presence rather than a momentary overlap. Constant correction defined the phase. Spacing was preserved through ongoing reaction. Alignment existed only as long as adjustments continued. The proximity was dynamic rather than static. The interaction remained controlled. No sudden movement altered conditions. No maneuver signaled escalation or withdrawal. The encounter persisted under steady parameters. This phase established the character of the interaction. Shadowing became a sustained activity rather than an initial approach. Movement patterns stabilized. The encounter continued without deviation or incident. Throughout the encounter, no radio communication was initiated by either side. Standard maritime channels remained open and available, yet no calls were made. Bridge-to-bridge frequencies were monitored continuously. Silence persisted without interruption. The absence of communication was consistent. No initial hailing occurred during approach. No identification requests were transmitted. No acknowledgements were exchanged. The lack of radio traffic did not fluctuate with distance or duration. Silence remained unchanged as proximity was sustained. Standard procedures were observed. Navigation channels remained active. Emergency frequencies were not utilized. No warnings, advisories, or intent declarations were broadcast. The encounter unfolded without verbal or electronic exchange.
Movement replaced communication.
All interaction occurred through positioning, spacing, and alignment. Course changes conveyed presence. Speed adjustments indicated intent. Relative motion became the sole means through which behavior was expressed. No signaling accompanied maneuvers. No flags were raised, no lights were flashed, no audible signals were employed. Visual indicators remained limited to standard navigation lighting. The interaction remained understated and procedural. Silence functioned as a condition, not a pause. The absence of communication was not temporary or situational. It persisted throughout all phases of proximity. No attempt was made to alter this condition as time progressed. Assessment relied entirely on observation. Behavior was interpreted through movement patterns rather than statements. Intent was inferred from alignment and correction rather than declared purpose. Positioning replaced dialogue. The lack of communication reduced ambiguity. Without verbal exchange, interpretation depended solely on measurable actions. Speed, heading, and distance provided clarity. Movement remained predictable and consistent. No misunderstandings were indicated. The interaction remained stable. No erratic behavior suggested confusion or misinterpretation. Silence did not introduce uncertainty. It reinforced reliance on established maritime conduct. Both sides maintained procedural discipline. No action suggested escalation through communication. No warnings preceded movement. Silence was maintained without deviation from navigation norms. Internal coordination continued independently. While external communication remained absent, internal monitoring and logging continued without interruption. Silence externally did not imply inactivity internally.
The encounter progressed without verbal acknowledgement.
Neither side signaled conclusion or continuation through radio. No transition was announced. The interaction evolved solely through spatial adjustment. Silence became a defining characteristic. Over time, the absence of communication shaped the nature of the encounter. It reinforced a movement-based interaction framework. Words were unnecessary to sustain alignment. The operating environment remained controlled. No external factors required communication. Sea state and visibility remained stable. Civilian traffic did not necessitate warnings or advisories. The absence of communication persisted to the end of this phase. No attempt was made to alter the condition. Silence remained unbroken. The interaction continued without escalation, clarification, or announcement. This phase underscored the role of movement as message. Position, speed, and spacing conveyed all necessary information. Communication channels remained unused. The encounter advanced under quiet procedural control.
Maintaining sustained shadowing required continuous adjustment. Relative position could not be held without ongoing correction. Each change in heading or speed by the transiting warship introduced a requirement for response. Alignment depended on reaction rather than control. Over time, Venezuelan vessels increasingly adjusted in response to external movement. Course changes followed rather than preceded movement. Speed corrections occurred after relative spacing shifted. The pattern reflected reaction instead of direction. Shadowing remained intact only through continued response. The burden of adjustment became apparent. Each incremental change required attention and correction. Small deviations accumulated quickly if unaddressed. Maintaining proximity demanded constant monitoring and immediate response. Maneuver options narrowed. Sustained alignment reduced flexibility. The range of available headings diminished as spacing was preserved. Speed variation remained limited to maintain relative position. Freedom of movement decreased as correction replaced navigation. Predictability increased as a result. Movement patterns became easier to anticipate. Adjustments followed consistent timing and magnitude. Variability declined as constraints accumulated. The interaction settled into a repetitive cycle of correction. Initiative began to shift. Control over movement did not rest with the shadowing vessels. Changes were driven externally. Reaction replaced initiative as the dominant behavior. Direction was maintained through response rather than choice. The transiting warship remained unconstrained. Course and speed continued within established parameters. No corrective movement was required to manage proximity. Navigation remained routine. The vessel did not assume the burden of maintaining alignment. Shadowing imposed structural limits. Maintaining proximity required attention to every change in geometry. Each adjustment consumed maneuvering options. Sustained reaction reduced independence over time. The interaction remained stable. No sudden maneuver altered the balance. No escalation accompanied the shift. The change occurred gradually through accumulated constraint rather than decisive action. Situational awareness remained constant. Tracking systems continued to provide accurate data. Awareness did not degrade as initiative shifted. All vessels remained visible and accounted for. Constraint influenced behavior. As correction became continuous, opportunities for independent maneuvering decreased. Alignment dictated movement. Shadowing vessels became increasingly committed to maintaining position. The shift occurred without announcement. No communication accompanied the change. No signaling marked transition. The shift in initiative was observable only through movement and timing. Predictability defined the phase. Corrections followed established patterns. Reaction times stabilized. Behavior became consistent. The interaction transitioned from dynamic alignment to managed constraint. The operating environment remained unchanged. External conditions did not force the shift. Civilian traffic did not affect geometry. Sea state and visibility remained stable. The encounter continued without escalation. No warnings were issued. No deviation signaled intent to alter interaction. The shift in initiative remained procedural and unspoken. This phase redefined the interaction.
Shadowing persisted, but control diminished. Reaction replaced direction. Movement reflected constraint rather than choice.
The balance of initiative had changed.
After several hours of sustained proximity, Distance between the vessels began to increase incrementally. The change did not occur through a single maneuver or coordinated signal. Separation developed gradually through a sequence of small positional adjustments. Venezuelan vessels altered course individually. No synchronized movement was observed. Each vessel adjusted, heading at different intervals. Course changes were measured and deliberate. Speed reductions followed independently rather than as a group action. Shadowing ceased without announcement. No radio communication preceded disengagement. No navigational warnings were issued. The transition from proximity to separation occurred through movement alone. Distance widened steadily. Relative bearings expanded as alignment loosened. Spacing increased beyond sustained shadowing range. The need for continuous correction diminished as geometry relaxed. The U.S. warship continued operations without interruption. Course remained unchanged. Speed remained consistent. Navigation proceeded under standard operating parameters. No movement suggested reaction to disengagement. No escalation followed. No additional surface contacts entered the area. Airspace monitoring remained clear. Sensor data confirmed increasing separation across all tracked vessels. The surrounding ships continued to diverge. Individual courses became distinct. Speed variation increased slightly as alignment was abandoned. Formation integrity was no longer maintained. Disengagement occurred without urgency. No abrupt turns were recorded. No rapid acceleration or deceleration occurred. Movement reflected controlled separation rather than withdrawal under pressure. Situational awareness remained uninterrupted. Tracking systems continued to monitor relative position. All vessels remained accounted for as distance increased. No loss of clarity occurred during separation. The operating environment normalized. Relative motion stabilized at wider separation. Maneuvering space expanded. The tactical picture simplified as proximity ceased to be a factor.
No follow-on actions were required. The U.S. warship did not alter readiness posture. Watchstanding routines continued under standard procedures. Internal logs recorded the encounter as concluded. The Venezuelan vessels did not reestablish alignment. Once separation began, it continued without reversal. No attempt was made to close distance again. Movement patterns indicated conclusion rather than continuation. The encounter ended without incident. No weapons were employed, no warnings were transmitted, no communications were exchanged. The outcome was determined entirely by navigation and spacing. Environmental conditions remained unchanged. Sea state and visibility did not influence disengagement. External factors played no role in resolution. The U.S. warship proceeded. Transit continued as planned. The operating area returned to routine conditions. The encounter left no physical trace. The event was complete.